Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Catholic Truth Podcast, where we teach and preach the Catholic faith that has come down over 2,000 years from Jesus and the apostles. We want to help you to know, love, and live your Catholic faith and be able to explain it and defend it. And here today, we have a wonderful, inspirational, awesome story, which I'm super excited about. And it's a rags to riches story, but a Catholic one. And as a wonderful Catholic who I had the opportunity to meet when I was speaking to Legatus in Cincinnati, Ohio, a couple of days ago. And his name is Adam Kohler. And he's a wonderful man. He actually had me on his podcast, and I heard some of his story. And then I said, oh man, I have to have you on my podcast. We have to do that. So this is Adam, and Adam is an entrepreneur. He's a serial entrepreneur and a side hustler expert. He's a digital agency owner, a licensed Kentucky realtor and investor. He's an author, a podcaster, and just an all-around great guy. So, Adam, I'm so happy that you're here today. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
Brian, it's amazing to be on here. I appreciate it. Definitely thanks for coming out to Legatus and telling your story. I think it was a really dynamic speech, and people were pumped up about it.
Yeah, I had a great time. It's just wonderful to be around a lot of good Catholics, solid Catholics who are influencing others. And I like influencing influencers, because let's be honest, when you're at the top, who's feeding you? Who's helping you? You're feeding everyone else. You're changing the world. You're the world changer, but where are you getting your food from? So, if I can help feed others who are at the top, if I can help influence them, if I can help give food to their soul to keep them going, I'm so happy to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you're correct on that. People have a lot of demands on them when they are successful, and that's what Legatus is made up of, is a bunch of successful business people. And the reason most of us are in Legatus is because we want to, keep Christ, be remembered that Christ is part of our success, that God is always looking out for us, and be around other people that are like that as well, and keep the faith in our families, in our businesses, and in our personal relationships.
Amen. And I think, some people say, oh, it's bad to have a lot of money. But in fact, a lot of the saints I've read, specifically St. Teresa of Avila, St. Francis de Sales, some really powerhouse saints, said you not only should have money, but if you do, it's your obligation to make more so you can use it for the kingdom of God and to help build up the world using the gifts and talents that God has given you. And I feel like that's exactly what the organization of Legatus does. They're helping other people, and they're trying to weave in the Catholic faith into society and really bring about that new evangelization in some sort.
Yeah, well, it's bad not to have money, Brian. Like you remember, and I remember what that was like. And, both of our childhoods, I think, and people that have, subscribed to your podcast and watched your show and listened to you, they know the background you come from. I mean, rough Boston upbringing. I had the same issue here in Cincinnati. I grew up on the west side of Cincinnati, which is, can be the tough part of the city. The school I went to, the area that it was in, the west, it was in Over the Rhine, which is next to the West End. And that West End neighborhood is where the projects were. And it was considered by the FBI to be the most dangerous neighborhood in America for an entire decade. You had a 1 in 3 chance of being a victim of a violent crime there. I would say that those people probably didn't have much money, didn't have much resources, and life sucked for them. Life sucked for us in our Appalachian neighborhood that was just west of that I grew up in. And I was surrounded by poverty, downtrodden attitudes, sadness, violence, everything you find in a bad neighborhood or a bad community. And it's, it stems from poverty. A lot of these actions that people take in their lives and what gets people in trouble, I think, stem from poverty. So, my goal was to stop being poor. That was my number one goal. I didn't like it. I came from a broken home. My mother suffered from depression. A lot of times we lived with my grandmother in a 1-bedroom apartment. And my brother and I would sleep on a bed in grandma's bedroom. And then grandma would sleep on a reclining chair. My mom would sleep on a couch. And, we tried to hide from the landlords because we weren't supposed to be there. So, that was rough. And when you're surrounded by violence, when you're surrounded by poverty, when you're surrounded by hopelessness, it's things like the church, which my grandma beat into us. Little 5 foot nothing German woman. She wasn't having it, and she had it rougher than us, and she let us know that growing up during the depression, picking poke from down on the river, making poke salad because they didn't have money to go to the store and buy food, cooking for the nuns, making $5 a week. I mean, it was bad, and
Wow.
to us,
Crazy.
that was struggle. That was struggle, right?
Yeah, no,
So
that's crazy. And she influenced you in your Catholic faith from a young age. Were you guys, what was the mindset you guys had? Were you like, why does God allow this? Or maybe were you like, did you lean on God, or was it stressful for you, during these times?
I don't think I ever blamed anything on God. I think I blamed it on just the situation we were in. I mean, it's the world around us. It was humanity to me. It was just the people I was around, the situations people were in. Uh, you know, Everybody has free will, right? And sometimes that free will can be used to make other people's lives miserable. People breaking into your cars, people stealing from you, people jumping you. I've been jumped more times than I can count for no reason. I mean, Brian, you understand that. It's just
Yep,
sometimes
I
people
do.
jump you just to jump you because they don't like you or they're trying to show off to some of their friends. And there's gangs around and everything else. I never blamed any of that on God. I mean, God was a replacement for my father in a way. I mean, God is our father, right? God's Jesus's father. God's the creator of everything, good and bad. If you don't have the bad, you don't have the good, right? If everything's good all the time, then how do we grow? And that's the way
Yeah.
I think I learned about it early. And when you study successful people and when you study how people get out of their situations like we did, you don't become a victim. You don't blame anyone, especially God. And I think some people do that. And it's because they don't
Right.
really understand the troubles that they're going through is meant for them to grow. And I think
Yeah.
folks like us understood that and we did something about it. But yeah, my grandma definitely. I mean, no matter how hard it was for them, she never lost her faith. And I think watching her uh, instilled that in us as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, my mom always instilled the faith in me from since I could talk. We'd pray every single day before bed. We'd pray grace before meals. We went to church every Sunday, and despite a difficult upbringing, I really feel that was the best gift she could ever give me because that's the best gift you could give anyone is faith, is that rock solid, just the rock that you can hold on to in good times and in bad, when it's raining and when it's pouring. And yeah, I remember just to your point, I remember in Boston, I don't like being jumped, so I always tried to get out of it if I could. My friend got jumped by like 30 kids because we were in a bad
Oh
area
yeah.
of Boston where I went to school. And but I got almost jumped many times, but I usually could pay my way out of it, because I'd prefer that as an alternative, to be honest. And I mean, when the
Right.
people come up to me and they're like twice my size and there's multiple of them, what are you going to do? Nothing. So yeah, even through all that, I still had questions, God, why did you let this happen? God, I don't understand. But I never gave up on God. I kept that prayer life. I kept praying to him every day, even when I don't understand. And I think that's one of the critical um, under really lessons for life we need to know, because many people do give up on God. They question, God, why did you let my grandmother die? And they blame him as if we're like almighty, all powerful, all knowing, and he doesn't know what he's doing up there, right? So, I'm glad to hear that you always had your faith. So you guys didn't have a lot of food. You didn't have a lot at all. I mean, I think you said that you didn't even have enough food perhaps for the week sometimes. Like maybe you could talk about that, and how long did that last and how did you get out of it eventually?
Well, it definitely helps when your grandmother grew up in the depression. And we learned how to make things stretch. You'd always have the containers with the grease in them, and those would be next to the stove or in the refrigerator. And she'd always make spaghetti, like this cheesy spaghetti casserole thing she always came up with, which was delicious. But yeah, I mean, we would go to school and we got the school food tickets because we went to public school, and I would learn how to hustle food tickets. Actually, I was kind of in a little street gang for a while there with this kid named Deshane, and his grandmother, believe it or not, was the security guard of the lunchroom area. And she knew who I was because, I was friends with her grandson. And she would always bring me milk that other kids didn't want because, maybe they were lactose intolerant or they just didn't like chocolate milk or whatever. So she'd bring me extra ones of those. I'd have 3 or 4 milks sometimes. It was like prison, Brian. You were just making friends with the security guards and hustling things. And yeah, I'd get a couple slices of pizza. I don't know who didn't like their pizza, but there were people out there that didn't like their pizza. They didn't like their chili, depending on what day it was. But I would usually have like 1, 2 lunches, and then there'd be kids at school who would sell because you get your food coupons every half a year, right? So you get enough to go half the year, and then you get another set to go the other half. There were kids selling their food, their whole entire half a year's food tickets for $5 just so they could go to the shop and get a pickle and a bag of chips and a drink. And I mean, you see people, there's grown people in society that think like that as well. So, but I would take advantage of that. That was an investment for me. So I'd sell some toys to somebody or find a way to get my $5, and then I'd buy those lunch tickets, and I'd have multiple lunches. And then another friend of mine, Ralph, his aunt ended up working in the line at the kitchen. So, I'd maybe get an extra helping of macaroni and cheese every now and then.
Nice. So you say you're a side hustling expert in on your
Yeah.
LinkedIn and website. And I guess it started at a young age, getting
Oh
through.
yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
yeah, anybody, look at the recording studio that he's in. This man, Adam, from rags to riches, he flipped that building and I went there, I recorded there. It's really nice. And so, I mean, anybody can turn their life around. Anybody can, take the life that was given to you and kind of upgrade it, and sometimes severely. So I'll put it in the description notes below, but I'll link you to his podcast, and I'll link you to his Side Hustle podcast, which teach you and help you to know how to do that. I mean, because a lot of us kind of like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's what the rich people know that middle class and low class don't know anything about, and it's like once you learn that, you teach it to others. So, feel free to
Right.
check that out. In addition to his, Catholicity, he also has a lot of worldly wisdom as well that may be able to benefit you. So, so what's next, Adam? Like how long did that last, and how long did it take to get out of that poverty? When was that moment that you made the mental switch? Like, I'm going to do something about it. And how did you do that?
Actually, you know what the funny thing is? I look back and I say, I don't think I ever thought that I would stay like that. My mom and my brother and I, this is before the internet, right? When families actually used to sit down and do things together. And then my aunt Felicia, we would sit down and we'd play the game of life. You remember that game, the board game,
Oh,
Game of
yeah,
Life?
yeah, yeah.
So we'd sit down and play the game of life, and I would win a lot because I would immediately become a doctor or one of the higher paid positions, and then I would end up collecting a bunch of money in the game, and in a way, I think that motivated me. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I never really thought that I would stay in that environment or in that situation. And I always I never want to leave it, right? I mean, to this day, I mean, I live in the heart of the city. I live in a, transitioning neighborhood. My wife bought a house in a neighborhood called Mount Auburn about a little over a decade ago now. But when we met and we got married, I ended up moving into her place because she owned it, and I rent property too, so I just rent my stuff out. But I don't like to get to live above my means, even if I can, because being in an urban environment, being in a place where I can still see other people struggle, keeps me out of a bubble. I think one of the problems in today's world is so many people live in a bubble, right? They forget where they came from. If they came from environments like we came from, they go and they hide, right? And then they forget about the other people, right? That's one of the reasons I have the podcast, is because I kind of got sick of the narrative during the whole Bernie Sanders days, and now you've got Ocasio-Cortez, and I don't mean to get political, but a lot of those people, they spread the wrong message. And I don't think they grew up the way we grew up. And I can tell because most people that grew up like us, and got out of that situation are pushing hope. They're not pushing despair for their own benefit. And I think when you tell people that America is the worst place in the world, that America is this, racist, this xenophobic, this exclusionary, shut the door behind you country, which it completely is not. I mean, this is the land of hope, right? This is the land of the American dream still. And to tell people that that's not, and that they should rely on the government, which is what we did, right? But at some point, the government can only take you so far. And I don't think God wants us to live under the foot of the government, right? I don't think they want us to live hand to mouth from the government. I think God gave us all talents and skills, and we need to take advantage of that blessing that we're given. And you and I both did. I mean, I'm sure when you were growing up, you never thought you'd be doing this podcast. I never thought I'd be doing a side hustle podcast, but I felt a calling to do that because people need information. And I think the one problem is we don't share enough information. The people who got out and were able to figure it out, we don't go back and tell people. That's one of the biggest problems. You leave and you don't
100%.
share that stuff. A lot of us Legatus people do, right? And I think that's what people need, because when you grow up poor, when you grow up broke, when you don't have anything, I had always had God, right? But you don't have information. You don't have, you could be a drug dealer, you could be a gang member, you could be an athlete, right? But those are the only things you know the path for. Most people don't know the path to success and entrepreneurship in different ways, and all the different types of things that they can do to get out of that. I call it indentured servitude.
Yeah.
That 9 to 5 service industry life that makes people miserable and honestly makes them question God. Why are you doing this to me, God? Why am I struggling so much? Why does inflation keep going up? Why can't I afford groceries this month? That hurts me to think there are people going through what I went through, and I want to share ideas. I want to share possible ways that they can get out of their situation as much as I can. And that's what the whole Side Hustle podcast is. That's why I consult with people. That's why I try to spend as much time as I possibly can working with other people on what I think I can share.
And I love that. And I love that about you. It's right. Hit the money on the right on the head, like just boom, because you're right. Nobody shares that information. It reminds me of you and I were kind of reminiscing about the movie Cabrini, and how
Oh, great
wonderful it
movie.
was. But
Mm.
like how many of those immigrants became really wealthy and then forgot where they came from and didn't help the little people under them, which is why Mother Cabrini was seeking them out and be like, did you forget that your people came here? Did you forget that you were one of them? And she was chiding them. So I love the fact that you not only got out of that, but you are helping other people too as well. You're giving them the knowledge, and sometimes knowledge is more than money. It's more than gold,
Oh, it's,
because
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, and people can give you things, right? The government gives people money all the time, but it's goes through one hand and out the other, right? I mean, that's just like these kids. The government gave them these food tickets that would provide them lunch every day for half of the school year. And what did they do? They went off and sold it for $5 so they can go get a bag pickle and a bag of chips and a pop. I mean, that's that's what they did, right? And that's just the mentality of so many people. I think short term wants over long term needs, right? I think that is pervasive in our society, if anything. And then when they run out of that thing they were given, then they get upset and want more, right? And I think self reflection is something that we all need to do. And I think the people who get out of those bad situations are the type of folks that can delay gratification, right? We think, hey, wait, if I sell this right now, I'm not going to have lunch tomorrow. And I don't know why everybody doesn't think like that. You probably don't know why everybody doesn't think like that, but there are people who don't think like that, right? And it's hard to get them to come around. But I think we live in a world of victim blaming, or not victim
Mhm.
blaming. I think we live in a world of victimhood. I think we live in a world where uh, victimhood is glorified being a victim is glorified. And I don't see myself as a victim. You asked me earlier, did I ever blame God? No. If I don't succeed, I blame myself, right? I mean, if this was a if I played on an NFL team and I didn't put in the work, I'd be cut. I wouldn't complain that it was the coaches that didn't like me or whatever. I
Exactly.
just wasn't better than the next guy, and there's only so many roster spots on the team, you know? And I
Exactly.
think, and I don't know what happens, Brian. Maybe I don't know if you've reflected on a lot of this stuff, but I just don't know why a lot of people get stuck behind. But I definitely think it has to do with just a lack of information, and then people get caught up in um, issues. So I always tell the young kids, I say, don't get anybody pregnant when you're like 15, 16 years old. Don't get a felony as soon as you turn 18. Don't steal from other people. Essentially, what you learn in church, right? Like those are just basic things. And I said earlier, I feel like the church replaced my father because he wasn't around. He was an alcoholic, drug addict, hippie, and he went off and did whatever he wanted to do, and left us with nothing really, and my mom struggling. And I think a lot of people have that situation, and going to church, going to mass, kneeling, praying certain prayers, having a habits, right? I think that's one thing that we don't think about when we think about the church is, the Romans, right? What did the Romans do? The Romans organized things. They created a society. They created structure. They they made sense of chaos. And I think that was kind of handed down through the church. And in a way, it was meant to discipline us. And when I self-reflect, I think, you know what? My grandma pressing on me to pray every night. You mentioned what you guys did in your family, but my grandma saying, "Hey, pray every night. Uh, you know, go to mass every Sunday, stand, kneel, go through that process." If there's one thing that makes people successful, I think it's building habits, building positive habits, and having self-discipline at the end of the day. And I honestly, I feel bad for people who don't have the church, because I
Amen.
think that helps them. And I think that is God's way of helping us. It's one of God's ways of helping us besides
And
speaking to
giving
us.
discipline.
Discipline, 100%.
Yeah, and I love what you said there. I mean, all of it. I think part of the problem is now, I think it's a multi-pronged problem, but one of the big problems is that we are in an entitled mentality today, an entitled society where we think we get this, or we just think we should get that, or these people owe us this, or these people owe us that. And that's all ridiculous because no one has been owed anything
No.
except God's love, not even that from all eternity. He just gives us that freely. I think another problem is it's easier to blame than take responsibility. It's easier to say, oh, well, they didn't do this, so therefore or if they had done this, or if I had been given a better life, therefore I would have been. That's why we blame all these millionaires. Oh, well, most of them had just had it given to them, and we blame, we assume, we inject conjecture where we have no facts. And so I think part of the problem is that we blame others rather than taking responsibility. And I think that's a huge issue today, especially when I worked in the school systems. I see it all around. There's
Oh,
no
oh,
responsibility anymore. Everybody's told you're good. You can get a participation trophy. And then we're literally lowering the bar to the lowest possible rung. And it's a huge problem. I mean, like I said, there's many problems of why, but I think one of them is that we don't have a blueprint, like you said. We don't know how to get from A to B. We certainly don't know how to get from A to Z. We don't know the information. We don't have the knowledge. And I think some people, you just get frustrated, or they just either give up, they get depressed, they despair, and then, that turns to anger, that turns to negativity, that turns to, well, if
yes.
they, blah, blah, blah. And you know what I like what you said about the church. The church gives discipline. It teaches us how to pray, how to go to, even in mass, you stand, you kneel, you do everything. It has that discipline, built into it. And I'd like to know, kind of how you took that discipline you learned from your grandmother as a kid, and how you put that into your actual life. Like, what was the first thing you did to get out of poverty? Was it a job that you got? Was it a side hustle that you did?
Hmm. Yeah. So I started working for a group when I was 14, I believe, in high school. It was part of the city of Cincinnati. It was their media department. And the group that was formed was called CASA, which stood for Citizens Against Substance Abuse. And as someone who, grew up with a father who was dependent, and my brother and I have never drank, right? Outside of church wine on Sunday, never drank, never picked up a bottle of beer and guzzled it down, none of that. Never tried any drugs. My mom told us when we were younger,
Ditto.
yeah, my mom said, if you want to be like your dad, start drinking. So we never started drinking, and she never really drank, at least in front of us. Like it'd be maybe New Year's or something. We'd toast with a bottle of sparkling cider or whatever. But we just didn't have an alcoholic drinking culture in our family, and we could go outside and see drunks. I could walk outside and see guys on drugs, drunk people. I could see kids that I knew from the neighborhood who had abusive alcoholic parents. And then honestly, Brian, not having my father around broke a cycle in our family. It
Mm.
broke a cycle of dependency. It broke a cycle of this anger that was handed down, the substance abuse that was handed down. And growing up in a bad neighborhood, it showed me what it was like if I fell off the wagon, right? Like this is what happens. Guys like us, Brian, and a lot of other people, you fail once and it's over. I mean, you've got to pitch a perfect game. You got to bowl a perfect game. You can't fall off. There is no safety net for us. There's no safety net. What do you do if you mess up? Right? Well, you get somebody again, you get somebody pregnant when you're young. You get a felony as soon as you turn 18. You don't graduate high school. There's a bunch of things. Like I'd say there's a handful, maybe 4 or 5 things that you just got to avoid or try to do, like graduate high school. Just get a little bit of success in your life. Everybody can do it. It doesn't matter where you come from. You just need a win because we all pretty much start out the same way. I mean, every kid starts out poor. You depend on your parents, right? But every kid has the option to go their own way and create their own story. And I feel like that's what I did. But I
Yeah.
worked for this Citizens Against Substance Abuse group, and I was the anchor of a kids TV show. So we would go out and we would write our own stories, and they taught us how to use the camera equipment. When we had those big giant cameras, we'd go out and we'd film shows, and we would come back and we'd edit our film on those we'd pop the tapes into one side and the other, and we'd make our own little show. And I did that for 2 summers. And a friend of mine, Chris Baglin, who worked with me on the show, we were friends up until a couple of years ago when he unfortunately passed of a fentanyl overdose. And it wasn't he worked for Citizens Against Substance Abuse, but then he still went down that path. And we unfortunately both grew up in a similar type of environment. And you probably have had it too. People calling you up or seeing things on Facebook or whatever, or people passing. And it was a really good friend of mine that I worked with there. And we just kind of went down different paths. He's still, the day he died is one of my best friends. And it was
I know.
unfortunate. But, he broke up with a girl, and you hear about this kind of stuff all the time, but, a girl broke up with him. He fell into this little depression, and he ran into the wrong people at a festival one time. And, they went and they partied, and unfortunately he got in contact with the wrong stuff. And he had a heart condition that he didn't know about apparently. And that's what happened. And, that taught me working there, taught me a lot of things. It taught me some discipline too, because I had to be there to actually do the job when I was 14 and 15. And I think, working and feeling like you're producing something is really good for young people. And if you have a goal, which all of us that worked there did, we all wanted to kind of get out of the situations that we were in, and none of us came for money. But our goal was to push out a positive message. Here's what you could do without drugs and alcohol. And that kind of just stuck with me. And,
Amen.
I went from that into a job at an amusement park, went to college, came back, couldn't find any jobs in computer animation, which was the industry I was in. And I ended up working at Kinko's, which is now FedEx office downtown, second shift. with my computer animation degree, I'm sitting here doing business cards and wedding invitations for people for, I don't know, $4 or $5 an hour or whatever in the world I was getting
That
paid.
must have made you
And
feel good, huh?
oh, I know. Go to all this college in Pittsburgh of all places. I had a big Bengals sticker on the back of my car. They didn't like that at all. But yeah, I mean it was wild. And I just, you just stack things, I think, over time. You stack successes. You move from one thing to the other thing and you just keep leveling up. And I don't think we're ever done leveling up, honestly. And when you're a motivated person, I don't think you're ever going to be satisfied with what you've accomplished. It
Oh
just
yeah, I'm done. I
there's
don't need
people
to
out there
do
that
it.
understand what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you want your podcast to be the biggest one in the world. I mean, you want to surpass Joe Rogan and Father Mike Schmidt and like all these other people, right? I mean, we're competitive people. I mean, in order to get out of that situation, I think you have to be competitive. You have to be a fighter. You have to want to do it. And I think if you put God in your life, especially at an early age, if you're blessed enough to have a family member, a parent, a grandparent like I did that puts God first and teaches you to put God first, it keeps you humble while you're on that ascent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have basically flunked out of high school. So, what you said about that is true. Just doing that right little thing, one step after another is so I would have flunked out of high school if it wasn't for my mom. Because I had like a
Mm.
35 average in English. I had like a 45 in math. I had like a 40 in chemistry. It was like abominable. And it was my mom who made me go for extra help every single day. And they passed me because I was trying. But really, I think they wanted to get me out of there. But the bottom line is I passed, and that was huge for me because then, I went to college. Although my guidance counselor, to be fair, told me not to go to college. He told me I was dumb and that's for smart kids and you're not going to make it. And I remember the day that I finished my 2-year college because I didn't take my SATs because I didn't feel like it, too lazy. So I went to a 2-year college. I got Dean's List every semester, like, 3.96 or something like that. And my mom was like, you should go rub it in Mr. Turley's face, my guidance counselor's face. She's like, you tell that guy who
Mhm.
told you you couldn't do it, you go show him you can. And, my mom, as much as she was hard on me, she was also a big cheerleader and always tried to do what was best for me. If it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be anywhere I was today because she sent me to the
Right.
Catholic college. That's where I got transformed. That's where I got my desire, my calling to do ministry. And that's why I am doing what I'm doing today. So it's just so interesting that
God bless her.
you need those
Yeah.
positive people in your life. We need more youth programs in the church. Are there any bishops
Oh,
watching? Are there any priests watching? Is there anyone who cares about our youth out there that is watching? Seriously, how many
where are they?
times we say we care about the church? How many times we say we care about our youth? Oh, the youth are one of the most important things in the church. Oh, but we're not willing to invest in them. We're not willing to give any money to the programs. Oh, we don't have any money. If they're really important, then you get the money. Stop saying they're important to you because they're not. If they
That's right.
were, you would get the money. And this gets me so aggravated. I'm sick of hearing it. I'm sick of seeing it. If they're important to you, it's like saying, oh, God's important in my life, but I don't pray. No, he's not important in your life because you don't pray. And it's the
That's right.
same thing with our youth. If our youth are important, you will find every way to make it happen. We need more youth programs. We need more evangelization. We need more apologetics. And we need more people reaching out to these kids who are dying and don't have good influences. And many of them are in the church. How many Catholic kids are addicted on this or going to that? Why do 4 out of 5 kids lose their faith before college? Because we're not reaching them. We are not reaching them. And we've done a terrible job over the last 50, 60 years. It's one of the reasons I started this ministry. It's one of the reasons I started Catholic Truth, because somebody needs to do something. And I'm not saying nobody's doing anything, because there's a lot of good youth ministers and there are a lot of good people who are doing, but we need a lot more average across the world. There are not that many youth programs. And there are many big churches that have no youth programs. And that is a sin. That's an abomination. And we
Right.
really need to do something about it. Sorry for the
No.
soapbox
This
tangent.
this is my number one thing. I mean, I'm running for Hamilton County Commissioner right now here in Southwest Ohio, in the Cincinnati area, and the secular world is after these kids. They want these kids. They want their soul. They want everything. I mean, if you listen to their rhetoric, they're telling these kids what they can't do more than what they can do. And you have the church, which has an opportunity to pull these kids back into something positive, right? The Around here, I actually used to do some work with the archdiocese here on a school website, because that's what we do, my ad agency. We do a lot of website work. And, there's really no reason to send your kids to a public school here when there's opportunities at Catholic schools. You're going to get a much better education, and you're gonna get a positive message, right? You're gonna have God involved in your education, in your life at an early age, even if your parents aren't doing that, they aren't playing that role. But if you look at just the Cincinnati Public Schools, and I sit on the board. I went to Cincinnati Public School. I went to the School for the Creative and Performing Arts, which I was really lucky to go to. And it is a magnet school. I sit on the board there, the funding board, to help raise money for different programs for the kids. But it's a very inner city school. And at the time I was going to it, half the school was from the projects where I was telling you all the crime was. And, the other kids, some of the other kids were bussed in from other parts of town. But overall, that school, and there's another school called Walnut Hills, which is the top public school in Ohio. Those two schools together have over a 90% graduation rate. Cincinnati Public Schools in general have a 75% graduation rate, and that includes GEDs. So actually, even though you have two schools that have a 90% graduation rate, if you take GEDs out, overall Cincinnati Public Schools probably has around a 50 or 60% graduation rate. So what do you think some of the other schools that aren't School for the Creative and Performing Arts, that aren't Walnut Hills, the rest of the Cincinnati Public Schools, there's probably 40% graduation rates in some of those schools. And we have a 19, if you look up U.S. News and World Reports, we have a 19 out of 100 college readiness score. I think 22% of the kids that are graduating are ready for college math, and 32% can actually read.
Wow. That's crazy.
And we spend $19,000 per student. $19,000 per student. And they're getting ready to lose, I think it was 30-something million dollars that they were getting in federal money during the COVID years. And of course, they got used to spending that money, right? So now it's, we need more money. For what? What are you doing? What are you doing?
No wonder you want to do something about it.
They're not solving any problems, right? And
exactly.
I don't know why, but these administrators are making $250,000 a year. And, that's one of the things I want to do is bring trades back. Bring things back that, we lost all this manufacturing, right? You got a lot of people out here who just don't want to go to college, or they're not fit for college, or they went to Cincinnati Public Schools and they don't know how to read, at a college level. So why not bring vocational programs back into these schools where these kids can learn how to do something with their hands? We have a lack of plumbers, electricians, tradespeople. We got baby boomers who are trying to sell their businesses. There's no succession plan.
Yeah.
So these businesses are just going to disappear? You think we have a housing crisis now? How about when there's no plumbers or electricians? Do you think we're going to be able to build the number of houses? We're millions of houses, short right now. So society in general, I think, has been focusing on the wrong stuff, identity politics, instead of what keeps this country going, right? And, I'd love to bring that back into not just Cincinnati Public Schools, but in schools around the country. I'd love to pilot it here and let this be a sandbox for that. But why not connect these kids to these boomers that are, 5 years down the road, they want to sell their business. Okay, well, 2 years, junior and senior year, you're maybe apprenticing for this person who wants to sell their business. Then a couple years after graduation, you apprentice still, and then you work with, the county or the state or the federal government to provide SBA loans, which are available, an SBA 7A loan to purchase a business. And now these kids own a business that is possibly netting $200,000, $300,000 a year. There's one here in Cincinnati. I just looked on Biz Buy Sell. There was a business grossing a little over $1 million a year. They're trying to sell it for $1 million. Comes with vans, comes with equipment, comes with all this stuff. The guy's netting $300,000 a year. So you're going to go to college, spend 4 years in college, when you could just pick up a business like this that's netting that kind of money. Obviously you're going to have to pay back the loan, so you might not pocket $200,000 or $300,000 in the first, 10 years or whatever. But these kids could be doing that. And you could be filling positions that we need, right?
They do that here in, there's a town here near where I live, Darien, Connecticut. It's one of the richest towns in America. I live in probably the second or third most richest county in America. It flops between second, third, and fourth richest county in America. And Darien's kind of like that. They're very old school. It's like an 1800s town in some ways. Like They have
Mhm.
all the people have, they're all rich. I mean, they all have
Yeah,
money, but most of their kids are training in their trades. Yes, they go to college. Yes, they do their own thing, but there's a lot of people who train in their parents' trade and take over the business when they do it. Then they train their kids and their kids. And that's been going on for generations, which is why I think they're so, one reason they're so affluent, which is one reason why they're so successful, one reason why their businesses last. And, the exact model you're talking about, I think, at least from when I remember when I was a youth minister there, it was being lived out. And so, yeah, that's all very important. And sorry for getting heated earlier. I just see this fire, like the whole building complex is burning down, and I'm shaking people, and I'm pleading with them that there's people inside and nobody's listening to me. How loud
nobody.
do I have
Yeah,
to yell before people start doing something about this? I mean, it's one of the reasons I started Catholic Truth, because sometimes you just got to start it yourself. You got to do something about it yourself. But
100%.
I want to know what you did. I want to
Yes.
know what you're doing now. I want to know, kind of a little bit, kind of the short, I guess, version of the businesses that you've started, kind of
Yep.
what's going on now and how you became you in a sense.
I was just dragging along, working at ad agencies, and I'd gone from that Kinko's job into another job, and then eventually to bigger agencies. So Cincinnati is it's a brand capital, I would say. I mean, we've got Procter and Gamble here, biggest consumer packaged goods company in the world. You've got Kroger here, which is the biggest grocery chain in the world, and a bunch of other Fortune 500s, Fortune 1000s. I think we're way up there on the list for most Fortune 500s per capita. I think Boston's very similar, and we have a lot of designers, developers, advertising people here in the city, which is what I pretty kind of went to school for. And I was working at these agencies, and I met a buddy of mine, Matt Vorst, who turned me on to a friend of his who was starting a company called Dotloop. And it was a digital signatures platform for real estate transactions. And at the time, everyone had been faxing papers back and forth, right? If you were a real estate agent, you had a deal, you went and you got this, purchase agreement together, and you went to your office, you faxed it over to the other agent, and you waited the next day for them to show up and get it and take it to their guy, and he would sign it, and it would go back and forth, right? So we digitized that entire process. So we pretty much eliminated the fax machine in the real estate industry. So three co-founders. We later on we brought another one on, but we sat there and we worked on it. First office was a Panera Bread up on UC's campus, and we were getting pitched Amway while we were trying to build our little company, and that's for some reason where all the Amway people were. And eventually we moved into another office, but we spent about, I'd say, 18 months just kind of building that MVP, that minimum viable product, and got that out in front of people. And then Matt and Austin, my other two co-founders, went full time with it. And I had my ad agency that I had started at the time. And so I was kind of doing both things. And eventually we built that company up. And most of it was Austin. Got to give him a lot of credit. And Matt for doing all of our development work for equity. But eventually we built that up. We, probably got over 150 or so employees, 12 million in revenue, and sold that company for over 9 figures. And at the time, we had processed over $2 trillion worth of transactions through our software.
Wow.
And I kept going. Yeah. And so I exited that. We all exited that. I purchased a building over in Covington, Kentucky, an old Knights of Columbus building, 20,000 square foot. Looks like a little castle, and turned this into a co-working space. It was just a empty building sitting here doing nothing. And now there's over 10 companies in here. We've got co-working space for folks to come in and out. We've got virtual offices. We got a commercial kitchen in the basement. We're working on an event center upstairs. I've got my Side Hustle City podcast, which I do out of this studio here, and running for county commissioner right now. So I do a lot of stuff. I've got investment properties, rental properties in Cincinnati. I've got one getting finished here in April down in Miami, downtown Miami. And that's going to be a short-term rental property. And we just got a lot of stuff going on, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're doing amazing work. I mean, you started in Kinko's, and now you're renovating houses around the East Coast. You're investing in businesses, and you're making a lot of money, and you're trying to give back. I mean, anybody can make a lot of money, But what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're giving back. You're giving the information you learned back to others and helping others, which is
Oh,
amazing. And
100%.
that's what we're called to do as Catholics, as Christians. Maybe you could just give a quick overview of how your Catholic faith has played a part through all of this.
Well, I was married at the Vatican, if that tells you anything.
That's awesome.
I was working, like I said, I was working with the archdiocese, and my wife was like, "Hey, before we got married, are we ever going to get married?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, if we could figure out how to get married at the Vatican." So of course she does. She starts making phone calls, right? Who's that guy that we work with? Oh, Josh Ader. Okay, she gives him a call. He connects us to Father Dan Hess, who's now at the seminary on the east side of Cincinnati. And he was studying, he was getting his doctorate in theology at the Vatican, and he helped us a lot because guess what? They only use fax machines at the Vatican. So we were married there. We were able to bring 50 of our closest friends and family uh, get them out of Cincinnati and into the place of culture. And some of them were mega church attendees. So I felt really good about bringing them into the real church, the truth, right? And they were enthralled
Amen.
by it, of course. And yeah, I mean, you know what the greatest thing is, the greatest feeling? My wife, I would say, her faith is now even stronger than mine. And when I met her, she was spiritual. You've heard it, right?
Yeah,
Everybody's like
yeah.
spiritual. It's like, oh, I'm just spiritual, which means I'm too lazy to go to church. That's what that means.
Basically.
And yeah, I can just pray. I can just pray. It's fine. I don't have to do anything. And just pray. The lazy excuse. So she was kind of all over the place. She drank a little bit. She was never a big drinker. Well, now she doesn't drink at all. She doesn't even think about it. She shows up here in my office on Fridays because she's going to confession at the cathedral, which is 2 doors away. We have a beautiful cathedral basilica here in Covington, Kentucky. If nobody's ever been there, it looks like Notre Dame. It's unbelievable. It's got one of the largest stained glass windows in the Western Hemisphere. I don't know if you guys were able to get over there, but it is
The doors
unbelievable.
were
And all I
all
got to
locked,
do.
unfortunately.
Oh, no, and it's a block away. I mean, you remember it was a block
Next
away. It's
time.
so easy to get over there. So yeah, she comes up here on Fridays and drags me over to confession, and we go to church every Sunday, and her faith has grown so much. She's doing Bible in a year. She prays the rosary every day. She just recently got a
Awesome.
little tattoo of the rosary on her hand here around her thumb, and we plan on going on some pilgrimages. And actually, I think it's strengthened our marriage. It helped me through the toughest times that I had. It gave me faith, and knowing that there's some things you can't control. There's some things that are just
Mm,
out of your hands. And we
mm.
live in such an individualistic society here in America, pure capitalism, individualism, right? It's not like Japan where, you've got a collectivism mindset. You're on your own. And when I go
Oh,
talk to the kids,
it's me, me,
I say,
me.
"You're on your own." There's nobody's gonna care. Everybody else is trying to pay their bills. Everybody else is trying to raise their family. People don't got time to hold your hand through life. But guess who does? God, right? Jesus is there for you. He wants
Mhm.
to walk with you. But most people refuse to listen, and they refuse to let him take their hand and help them through the toughest times. And I think I just intrinsically did that. And it was maybe because, my grandma made me go when I didn't want to go. I mean, when you're a kid, there's other things you want to be doing out in the streets. But eventually I came to appreciate what she did and appreciate the discipline and appreciate feeling like someone else had my back, right? And humble myself to a greater power that created me. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are missing that in their life. Uh, but I've carried it to the point where I got married, and then I was able to bless my wife with that faith, and now she's passing me up.
She's blessing you in return.
She's blessing me in return. That's right. And what's our
That's
job as
awesome.
married people, right? It's to get each other to heaven.
What does she do for work?
She owns a spa, so
Oh, that's right.
she
That's
and
fine.
it was great when I
Oh,
met
I
her.
should have
She was
stopped by
working.
there.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could have got your facial and everything. She was working in the back of a salon, doing nails and eyebrows and some facials every once in a while. And I asked her one time, being the entrepreneur that I am, I said, how many clients do you got? How many people personally like know you and come in here? And she said, oh, about 900. And I said, what are you doing working here? I mean, you've got relationships with people that you brought in.
Literally. Yeah.
And so we got her a space at a kind of a shared salon place in a strip mall. And she started out there, and then she eventually moved her way. Now she's got her own office, and she does great. It's hard with employees, I think, for her. And her faith helped her through a really tough time that she's had recently with an employee. And not just that. I mean, she wants to be a soft girl now. This is her thing. She doesn't have to own a business, right? But she's owned it for over a decade now. But she's learned what she could from it. Her faith has carried her through a lot of tough times in her business, up and downs. And you can imagine during COVID, right? What she would have
100%.
went through as an in-person business. And she's ready to enter her soft girl phase. She said she just wants to pray, listen to the rosary every day. She wants to keep the house. She wants to be more traditional now,
Wow.
which is
Dang.
which is great to see this transformation, right?
I might have to interview her at some point.
Oh, boy, she'd be a great interview. She would be an
Yeah.
excellent interview.
I'm going to Costa Rica for soon, but maybe when I get back, we can set something up in the future for that. That would sounds like a great story in the making.
Oh, really great story. And she's got some home problems as well. Very
Okay.
much. Yeah,
That's
very
great.
much. These are the
That's
type of
great.
people that I love to interview on my podcast, and I'm sure you do too. It's not always, rosy stories, right? And I don't
No,
think
exactly.
that wasn't who Christ was attracted to, right? Christ surrounded himself with troubled people, right? And I think when you have a calling like you do, in the like I feel like I do, we surround ourselves with troubled people, and we think, hey, we've been able to get out of this, or we've been blessed to ascend in some way, and we want to help other people. And then through your podcast, you're able to share stories like mine, like some of the other people, like your own story, every time you do a podcast episode, which inspires people. And that's God working in your life to work in other people's lives.
Amen. Amen. So, wow, great story. There's so much you could tell about your own life, where you come from, how you made it, advice you could give to people, but maybe you could tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, sure. So sidehustle.money is the domain name for our podcast. But wherever you listen to podcasts, Side Hustle City is the name of the podcast. So Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, you can just do a search for that. It's a little pig, a flying piggy bank with wings, because we live in Porkopolis here in Cincinnati. This was the pork manufacturing city. So our icon here is a flying pig. So I said, we can make a flying piggy bank, right? And that's our logo. So you'll see it, a little pink piggy bank that's got wings on it. And reversedout.com, reversedout.com. That's my ad agency. And adamkoehler.com is my personal website. And my last name's spelled Koehler. So it's almost like the sync people. But I think they put an umlaut over their O, so they got rid of the E. Well, we kept the E. So Koehler. And check me out on LinkedIn. Same name, Adam Koehler on LinkedIn. You do a search for me, you'll see me pop up. I'm here in Cincinnati, and I mean, those are great ways for people to connect with me. I'd love to connect with you guys on LinkedIn if nothing else. But check.
If you could send me all those links, I will put them in the description section below, so people could just click right on them and they can have that information.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Love your story.
Oh, Brian, I love your story too, man. God bless you, and thank you for the work that you're doing in this mission that you have. And God bless everybody who listens to this podcast. And keep up your hope. God's always with you and wants you to be successful.
Amen. Amen. And thank you all for watching and for tuning in. As always, I hope this has inspired you in many different ways, not just spiritually, but economically, just in general in life, to do big things. Don't think small, think big. And
Yes.
here at Catholic Truth, we're thinking big. I mean, we started with a whole 400 subscribers, and I had 400 subscribers on YouTube for 4 years. I had no idea how to get out of it. And that's when I said I need to do something. So I started taking courses and I started reading, I started learning, I started studying everything. We went from 4,000 to 6,000, and a few years later, we're at 70,000 almost. So I hope to be at over 100,000, next year, and 200,000 hopefully the year after that. But we want to grow a lot. And for that, I thank all of our patrons, all those people who support our ministry, all those people who work for us in everything we do. But if you're out there and you love what we do and you're inspired by it and you want to see us grow and you think our mission is incredibly important, the most important work on earth, please consider joining us, joining our team, supporting us $25, $50, $100, $200, $500 a month to help invest in the future of this so we can reach so many souls, save souls, change lives. Really, our world is dying and they need what we have. So thank you all. You can check that out in our description section below. And if our Patreon does not work, we have Patreon and PayPal. If our PayPal does not work, it's because our website is being switched to a new host right now. People have told us they can't email us. They can't even get on our website. That's why. So you can just go to info@catholictruth.org if you want to go directly to PayPal. Otherwise, hopefully, God willing, our website will be back up in a few days. Anyways, I digress. Thank you all for watching. We're praying for you. God bless you.